Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gangana Sadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalam Achalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Hello, welcome. Pay very close attention to these teachings. They are from a work of Adi Shankaracharya, Viveka Chudamani, and it is Advaita Vedanta. So these are the teachings that you find in the scriptures. They are according to the scriptures. So pay very attention to these teachings. Listen very carefully to these teachings. Then you should reflect upon them, reflecting a lot upon these teachings, and then meditate upon these teachings so that they may bear fruit in your heart. So moving on to verse 313. By the increase of selfish work, one increases desires. And by the increase of desires, one increases selfish work. So the more you have, the more you want to have. So this feeds itself. And that way the world, by entanglement, goes on. It never ceases. So this is the movements of the world. People increasing their level of work because their desires have increased. After they've tasted the fruits of those desires, they want even more. So they have to work even harder to get more, and so on and so on and so on. And this is why people are running around from one side to the other, just being moved by desires. Therefore, one who would like to do away with the bondage of the world must burn these two fully. The selfish work and the desires. Desires except desire for liberation. How? By giving up internal thought and external work. And that are selfish in nature. So it is the work that is selfish in nature that feeds this character, this ego, in his universal story. The ego is increased by these two, so one should seek the destruction of these, ego and its causes. By meditating on the real self, seeing Brahman everywhere. And these three go only by increasing the desire to be good to others. If you stop selfish work, you stop the internal desire. By stopping the internal desire, you stop the selfish thought. And the stopping of desire, it's what is called freedom, even if in this life itself. Jivan Mukti. That's the term for liberation in the body. So, again, if you stop selfish work, whatever work is there is not benefiting the character. It is not so, if it has no benefits, it has no future. Not even that, it has no purpose, no point. and it fades. When that desire for being good to others increases, the desire for selfish fulfillment subsides. As when the sun rises, all the darkness subsides. Darkness and its actions, different kinds of mistakes that come from darkness, are not seen when the sun, the Lord of the day, rises. So when that one eternal blissfulness is felt, there is no more bondage, neither is there the scent of sorrow. Denunciation of inadvertence. Reduce the world which you see in Brahman by thinking of that one reality always. The solidity of that blissfulness and the internal and the external being both one. Think of that, of the blissfulness. Pass your time and be free from all bondage. Pass your time absorbed, thinking about that blissfulness and seeing everything which just inside, outside, just that blissfulness. That one reality. Because blissfulness may be misleading. To be always in Brahman should not be neglected, for that neglect is death, says Brahma's son, Sanat Kumar. So to be always in Brahman should not be neglected. When can it be neglected? When it is possible. When it is possible to tune with Brahman, not just by thought, but by communion with Brahman, direct communion. We see this in many stages of the spiritual process. Even in the beginning, there's an experience of bliss, for example, and the seeker comes out of it and he wants to share his joy with the world because he is resisting to move, to dissolve there. So when you are able to tune in, then not tuning in is the neglect. And that brings again the strengthening and the life for the ego. Where was I? To be always in Brahman should not be neglected. And when this is possible, you have to continuously be in Brahman so that you can dissolve all those structures by the lack of your presence. Because as you are tuned in, absorbed in Brahman, nothing else is there, just pure identity, wholeness. And whatever appears to have been there is losing its strength, because now you have a seeing, a direct seeing. It's not mental concepts, it's not void, simple void. Now you have tasted that blissfulness. You have tasted real identity. Now you have to tune continuously with it. To the knower, there is no more danger than this neglect of remaining in Brahman. To the knower of Brahman, the one who has tasted already. For then comes delusion. Again, from that delusion comes ego. And from ego comes bondage or error. So that neglect is the great enemy of the knower. So you tasted it and wow, now I know already it's solved. Not really. And I don't need to tap in anymore because it is known. But then that brings back everything again. This delusion will distract even the knower immediately if he is intent upon the objects of the senses. So after direct contemplation, experience, if you still go and contemplate the objects of the senses, you fall down again. Because either you're in Brahman or you're not. And you're in everything else, in the objects of the senses. As the moss removed from the water comes back again, so this Maya covers the intellect of even the learned one who is not careful. If the mind once forgets its own object, Brahman, it goes out and out, just as a ball, if it falls, rolls down and down the stairs and does not stop until it reaches the lowest step. So once the mind forgets its object of meditation, which is Brahman, it starts going down, down, down. We see this at many levels. So people starting with meditation, for example, they push into intense meditation, and as they come out of it, they go back and back, they engross themselves, sometimes they go even to a lower stage, even lower than they were. And this is to compensate that experience so that the experience itself is forgotten or meaningless. If the mind once forgets its own object, Brahman, okay, I read this one. When you think of the objects of the senses, you want to enjoy them. It is a sequence. First you think, and eventually you start wanting to enjoy them. And eventually you will invest in those circumstances so that you can enjoy them. And from that comes desire. That desire engages you to possess, and that engagement takes you away from your real self. You're more than distracted. Therefore, with all care, one should try to keep himself recollected and should not be negligent. So, himself recollected, focused, not distracted, focused, and should not be negligent. Should use the opportunity that you are able now to tune lively, directly with that Brahman and remain there. Don't neglect that. Keep there until there's nothing left of the world. There is no greater death than this negligence. One who is careful in remaining in Brahman becomes successful very soon. Therefore, be careful and stay in Brahman all the time. So in this level of focus, it is very soon. It happens fast. In distraction, it can be endless. Once you fall back from your real self, you have fallen down. When one has fallen down, there's no hope for him. Removal of reflection. He who is free even in this body, he is free without a body also. He cannot make himself free in this body. If he cannot make himself free in this body, how can he be free when there is no body? So try to be free in this body itself. Well, I understand the direction, but this is not absolute terms, but okay. Okay. When this wise man, the knower of Brahman, sees even a little difference from Brahman, then comes fear for him, because that difference is nothing but the outcome of ignorance. So when this wise man, he is a wise man because he is a knower of Brahman, when he sees even a little difference from Brahman, then fear comes because, well, he is in a state of ignorance again. Therefore, if after the instructions of the scriptures, laws, and logic, when all these deny this separateness, yet one sees separateness from Brahman and thinks this separateness as its own self, then he is subject to pain and sorrow over and over again, like one who does wrong things such as stealing. So one who does wrong things and get caught pays the consequences. So the one who is a knower of Brahman and forgets about it and sees a difference, then he has to live the afflictions that come with it. Until he gets fully established. So one who wants liberation must give up The seeker of truth becomes free and finds its own eternal glory. But he who follows after falsehood binds himself, as in the case of non-thief and thief. So who follows falsehood? There's no way of following falsehood if tamas is not there, remember? And if tamas is there, no seeing of real self. So one who wants liberation must give up following after what is false. So not only falsehood, but what is false. Here is discrimination between real self and non-self. Must give up following after what is false, the cause of all bondage, and must live in that eternal self, knowing that as his own self, experiencing it directly. Because to stay in Brahman makes one blissful and takes away the ignorance, which is the cause of all pain and sorrow. Because the more you stay there, the less that binding belief that I am the body, the less it will persist. It will have no grasp over you because you have seen it, you have experienced it long enough. Therefore, do not take much notice of external things, because they increase desires that lead on and on to bondage. Therefore, know by discrimination what is the world. Give up the external and seek the real self always. So just by looking, by paying attention to sense objects, desire for them will rise. So pay no attention to them. It is the best way. If you stop the search for external things, the mind becomes cheerful. There's no sorrow, no pain, no expectations. He has freed himself from that. So it becomes cheerful. And the cheerful mind can see the Atman, the Supreme. When you have seen the Supreme, then comes the destruction of all bondages of birth and death and its seeds. Who is such a child that shall follow after unreal things, even while knowing what is real and unreal and being versed in the scriptures? Who will follow after the unreal to bring his own fall when discrimination is there? No one desires of liberation can do this. If he is doing this desire for liberation, it's not at his peak. There's no liberation for one who has attained. And this understanding that the desire is not at its peak, it's because you may increase this desire for liberation. So by knowing that you're still following after that which is unreal, it means that you have to push your desire for liberation to another level. There is no liberation for one who is attached to this body, obviously. One who is asleep cannot have wakefulness, and he who is awake can have no sleep, because these are contradictory. So if you're attached to the body, that means The I consciousness for you is the body. This is how you're acting through the body in the quest for sense pleasures moved by desire. So returning, connecting to the source is impossible. So one thing and the other, they don't go together. Method of abiding in Brahman. Who is liberated? Internally, externally, insentient, insentient, everywhere, knowing himself as the basis of all, and who has given up all names and forms and became one undivided self. One who stays in that state is surely a liberated one, a free soul. In every way, there is no better state than seeing one's own self everywhere, in order to make oneself free. Of course, that is the beauty of samadhi, but I think it will come already, but okay. Because that's the actual experience of reality. And this is what takes the shape, takes the substance, the believed substance of the ego of illusion. One can be partially free, but if you want perfect freedom, you must see yourself everywhere. And it comes when you do not take appearances as your own self. The upadhis, the sheets. By giving up appearances and staying in that state of oneness all the time comes this perfect freedom, where everything else is dissolved. But how is it possible for one who is in this body to give up all appearances? Because the mind must be in external things part of the time, right? The answer is not all at once. Those who want to have that blissfulness should carefully try to bring that state by staying as much as possible in the state of Brahman and by giving up the whole attempt for external enjoyments. So, to give up all these external things, it is step by step. You cannot do it all at once. But when you reach the possibility to tune yourself and to be in Brahman most of the time, this is where it intensifies. But you have to give up the whole attempt for external enjoyments. Without this, impossible. This idea of I am is so strong that it cannot be broken in a day. Yes. But it's so weak that it can be broken in a flash. But that's a different. Let's continue with this. Even the wise cannot do away with this sense of ego in a day. Because it is so strong, you should try all at once and be very careful to attain nirvikalpa samadhi. That samadhi which is constant. The samadhi, it is an absorption. This mistaken self, this speck of identity is reabsorbed in the source. And it stays in that state taken by the real self. This is samadhi. So the previous samadhi was the same experience, but it lasts a little bit and then it goes back to normal, to the yet normal. But then nirvikalpa samadhi is that constant state of samadhi. This sense of ego, by its power of delusion and power of distraction, unsettles the Purusa. So, the power of the ego is delusion and distraction. This is why the remedy is focus at all levels. But these are its powers. Without delusion and distraction, meaningless. two powers the ego has, of covering and of distracting. To cure the power of distraction is very hard. You have to let go of sense pleasures, cut them all altogether. It cannot be done unless you have the power to stay away with the covering. The snake in the rope first covers and then deceives. When you can separate the seer and the seen, as the swan separates milk from water, then naturally the power of covering goes away. So what this means is, for these powers of the ego to be destroyed altogether, that tuning, that direct experience with Brahman is a need. Because only the experience of the rope reveals the nature and the unreal nature of the snake. When the appearances cannot distract you anymore, when you are no longer under its power, then comes the sure knowledge of the Atman, because there is constant focus, and you can only disengage from the appearances if you are tuning with Brahman. And what is the cause of this distractions not disturbing you anymore? Complete discrimination of the real and the unreal is the cause of that settled knowledge. Understanding the separateness of the seer and the seen, that breaks the bondage caused by Maya, from which, if one is once free, bondage never comes again. These are not contradicting, because it makes affirmations that they seem opposite to this one, but it isn't. It's just passing different ideas from different angles of the same thing. The knowledge that we are Brahman is like a fire which altogether consumes the thick forest of ignorance. When a man has realized his oneness with Brahman, how can he harbor any seed of death and rebirth? Because when he realizes, when he establishes himself in the oneness of Brahman, the world disappears altogether with all its seeds. When the vision of reality comes, the veil of ignorance is completely removed. As long as we perceive things falsely, our false perception distracts us and makes us miserable. When our false perception is corrected, our misery ends, as the fear of the snake disappears by realizing it is a rope. You cannot be fooled again. Nature of substratum. For example, you see a rope and think it is a snake. Oh, it comes again. As soon as you realize that the rope is a rope, your false perception of a snake ceases, and you are no longer distracted by the fear which it inspired. Therefore, one who wants to liberate himself must know the nature of the real self and the unreal self. Both, because in the case of the rope, first you see the snake, and you need to see the nature of the rope. So in the case of the self, first you see the non-self, but you have to know the nature of the real self and also the nature of the non-self so that you can renunciate it. Because if you don't know, you cannot renunciate, and without renunciation, there is no self-realization. Like the union of the fire with the iron, by the union of the reality with the intellect, all these appearances come into existence. Union is a word, but okay, let's use it. Their actions are unreal, as we have seen in these three states: dream, error, and imagination. So all these changes of nature from egoism down to the body, are unreal because of their transient nature. So if the Atman is eternal, whatever undergoes change is non-Atman. Eternal, one without a second, indivisible consciousness, the witness of the intellect, separated from the manifest and unmanifest, the subject of I, the ever blissful, that is the supreme. Knowing in this way one's own self, which is separated from the manifested and unmanifested, ascertaining one's own oneness with that self, the one eternal consciousness, one becomes peaceful in the self. But ascertaining one's own oneness, it has to be experienced clearly. When one sees his own self in samadhi, when there is a direct experience of yourself, which is the self of all, then all knots of the heart are rent asunder once and for all. But it is nirvikalpa samadhi, as long as it needs. Even though it is a place, it is a state beyond time and place also. In that one inseparable self, Tao, I, and all these imaginations come only from the defect of the intellect. In samadhi again, that intellect becomes one with the Supreme and loses its impurities. So the changes of Tao and I and all vanish from one's knowing the real nature of external things and the self, of the non-self and the self. Okay.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.